everyone. Welcome back to the How To Podcast series. I have someone joining with me from across the pond where I am here in Canada. And the moment you hear his amazing voice, you're going to realize that we're talking to someone very special. And I love just calling him by this name because it makes me happy. Sound guy Fletch is here on the podcast. That makes me happy just to say that. So if you're looking for a sound guy and you want his name to be Fletch, he's here and he's on the podcast. Welcome, sound guy Fletch.
If that's your criteria, then honestly, I couldn't tick any more boxes for anybody, to be quite honest with you. And there's a very specific set. Well, the sound guy bit not necessarily so specific, but the Fletch bit very specific. And I'm kind of glad to fit something so specific and unique. So I appreciate the comment on the accent as well. Not so many people are too high on my accent. My wife is from another part of the UK, and when her mum first met me, she asked me why I sounded like Liam Gallagher, and which I appreciate as someone from Manchester, as a huge fan of Oasis. I took it as a compliment, but
it's all Wonderwall from here through. I love it. So amazing. So Mr. Sound Guy Fletch, tell us where you are in this great big world so everybody knows.
Yeah, so I'm in the wonderful city of Manchester, current home of, if you're a fan of European football, the home of the European champions of football, and the English champions of football, and home of the if there's a sports competition in the UK, Manchester is where the title currently holds. Not in the Costa del Manchester, where it is. I feel like in Canada, we're probably experiencing very similar. It's not very Costa del at the moment. It's a lot more Costa chill. Hailing from Manchester.
And so my assumption was when we first met the first time, your podcast would be about football, as you call it, on your side of the pond. But you have a podcast that caught me off guard in that you talk about football, but from a totally different perspective. Tell them about your show.
Oh, yeah. I am a huge fan of what you would call football. And in the good old gridiron, I somehow accidentally... So working in the music industry, as you've already mentioned, I'm a sound guy. The music industry has us up at silly hours. So I kind of live on Eastern time, basically. And, that kind of being up at those hours, that I managed to stumble across a sport called football that's either played with a foot or a ball, and managed to somehow fall in love with it. And I've had a podcast now for about 6-7 months where I talk to fellow British NFL fans about kind of how we all discover the sport, how and how we choose our teams, because obviously over here when we follow our football, which I am also a huge fan of, a lot of it's tribalistic. It's a lot more based on you're from Manchester, so you support Manchester City or Manchester United or Salford or Bury or Oldham. If you're from London, you support a team from, generally speaking, that'd be the kind of thing you're after. Whereas when we fall in love with the sport like that, there are only 32 teams in the world who play it professionally. And they're all 3 to 6,000 miles away. So, and the reasons we have for supporting those teams are all very different. And which means the reasoning for how we choose and why we choose those teams are all different. I think it's just really interesting to hear kind of the thought process behind choosing a team. So for myself, I'm a Detroit Lions fan, which is always met by, why? You're 3,000 miles away. Why choose such a god-awful football team? And a lot of that is down to music. So Motown, hip-hop, and a couple of artists that I've met who are from Detroit, and kind of having that weird tie to a city without ever visiting. So, I've got a current. That's my podcast at the moment where I talk to fellow Brits about our love for the gridiron.
How big is the NFL in your part of the world? Is it popular? I have no idea.
It's popular and it's growing.
Okay.
We're 2 out of 3 games in. For anyone who's listening now, you might be able to actually guess roughly where when we're recording this episode. We're in between the second and third game because they play 3 regular season games in the UK now,
Yep.
and all 3 are played in. 2 of them are played in a 65,000 seater stadium. Another one is played in a 90,000 seater stadium. Every single game is a sellout and has been for 15 years. The demand for tickets is even higher. There's been talk about putting more games on over here. I know personally a few friends of mine. I've actually got a book behind me that is of a guy who spent he spent his whole life savings doing a statewide trip, going to all stadiums.
Wow.
There's a couple of friends I've got who visit various parts of the US every year to go watch it. So we've got a core passionate fan base about the sport, and like I say, it's growing and growing and growing every single year. The more they play games over here, the more they continue to market themselves over here. So it's growing, it's getting there, and the fan base that we've got is passionate, dedicated to the sport.
Good.
As can be evidenced in the fact that we're staying up till half past 4 in the morning.
Well, that's commitment right there. So as far as going to a game, have you had an opportunity to actually be at a game and stuff?
Oh, not in the US, I haven't, okay. No. It's currently on my bucket list for in the next year or two. I think my wife knows it, but I haven't told my wife that it's on the bucket list yet. Yeah. But it's definitely on the bucket list.
Good. Awesome. That's amazing. It's okay. So tell me about your podcast journey a little bit. How much about podcasting did you know? You have a great background in audio and music and all that. Your leap into podcasting, what caught your attention to say, I want to do a show?
Yeah, well, to be quite honest with you, a friend of mine a few years ago was listening to a lot of podcasts. It's how he fell asleep. And he would turn up, and he was an artist that I was working with. We were doing sessions 1 or 2 times a week. And he'd turn up and he'd go, I'll be listening to this new podcast, or I'm listening to this podcast, and I'm listening to that episode. And one of the big ones was that, even at the time, it was the Joe Rogan podcast and things like that. And so and podcasts were starting to, I think it was about 2017, we started to see a real boom in podcasting. And we're talking at this point, it's probably about 2018, 2019. Yeah. So I was familiar with it. I'd kind of listened to a couple, and then I kept listening to some Detroit Lions ones based in the States, and kind of trying to take in that content and figure it out. And then as COVID hits in the UK, we went into the lockdown, and as a sound engineer, all of my work was studio based. Yeah. or live gigs. The remote work I was getting was very sporadic, and I had to figure out something overnight that I could do remotely, and stayed up for hours researching, just researching into podcasts. Because although it was something I was starting to listen to, it wasn't something I felt particularly passionate about getting involved with myself. But then I realized it's something that can be done remotely. It's something that when I kind of look at marketing, I look at engaging content, I look at content that's worthwhile for people, that makes people want to listen and draws people in, and podcasting is one of the best platforms to do that. And yeah, so kind of my real kind of jump into podcasting came around that time, where I started to speak to a couple of friends who had them, and did the whole kind of, listen, I can give you some advice on how to make your podcast sound a lot better, but can you do me a favor and tell me how you're putting it together? What's the management process like behind the scenes? How are you getting your podcast onto Spotify and Apple and all these different platforms? So spent, I'd say, about 6 months just chatting with friends, chatting with people that I knew, asking them how, what, why, when, where, being the most annoying little shadow around them for a while, and getting into it. Started one in 2020, which was similar to the one I've got now, but kind of helped build a platform and then took a step back because 9 months later, work picked right back up again. It wasn't something I could kind of give all my energy and time to, but I had a great team of people with me at the time who I could just kind of say, listen, I've given you everything you need.
Yeah.
You can all run with it. Good luck. Enjoy. And I've been essentially hooked on the podcasting world ever since.
Good.
And yeah.
So I would like to leverage your background in music and audio
Wouldn't we all?
For a new podcaster who has zero skills, talents. They've never done what you do, but they want to sound nice on a microphone and be clear. Again, you can spend a lot of money and buy all the best of everything, but even the best tools, if you're not recording yourself properly, if you're not using them properly, you might waste your money. So I'd like to get your wisdom and background to help somebody to do a great audio presentation. What do we need? What are some very simple basics that we can do today as we record our episodes to sound great on the microphone?
Yeah, and I say you can go and spend a lot of money on this. And as a sound engineer and as a podcaster yourself as well, you know just how easy it is to fall down that expensive rabbit hole. Unfortunately, with the way that the world's gone, the way that technology advances, you can now, like the microphones that I think you and I have both got, you can get setups for about the whole setup for the same price that sounds good.
Yeah.
And so I think some of the things you're looking at are just, making sure you're in a good room.
Yeah.
So right now, I'm not in the greatest room of all time, but I'm trying to make sure I'm in a good spot so that I can have, I'm not in an awkward place. I can rest my microphone so it's a good distance away from my mouth. I've got my little pop shield, my little pop filter, and making sure that my mouth is a good distance away to kind of take away the reflections of the room and the acoustics of the room. The better you can do that kind of thing, the better you're going to sound, immediately going to sound. And that's with any microphone. It doesn't have to be a like a Neumann U87, a $1,200 microphone. The kind of making sure your mic technique's on point. It's free. Good mic technique is free.
Yes.
And the majority of mics now, you can pick up cheap pop filters that will help with things like your plosive sounds, so your P's and your B's, things like that. So that's free and cheap ways to kind of tailor that sound, making sure that the room is a relatively low noise room. Making sure things like I make sure I turn the fan. We've got a fan in this room. I make sure I turn the fan off so that there's no background noise, because that fan's going to make noise that no matter how I angle my microphone in this room, the microphone's going to pick up some of that noise. And just kind of they're just a couple of the things that you can do to whatever microphone that you've got. Give yourself the best possible chance at getting a clean take, a clean recording.
Yeah, that helps. And I guess the other side too is to put some prep time into before you hit record.
Yeah.
Because a lot of time I listen to podcasts and you can tell that they're not ready. They got on the microphone and they're like, what do you want to talk about? I don't know. What do you want to talk about? And you're like, yeah, this is not going to go well. So then you start leaning heavily into your ums and your ahs and there's this awkwardness that's happening when you're just unprepared. So having a plan, having a goal, knowing who you're talking to, maybe a list of questions that you want to kind of cover. You kind of want to know what's the end goal here? When do we know we're done? So that we kind of hit the main things and we honor our guests and just be organized.
100%. And it doesn't matter how good you sound. Again, you can have a $1,200 microphone in something like a Neumann U87, but if you're not delivering good quality content, who wants to I don't want to listen to great sounding bad content. I'd rather listen to bad sounding good content, if that makes sense the way I've worded it. What a lot of the kind of problems I'm seeing at the moment in the world of podcasting, now I'm more into the production and management side of it and kind of putting it together, is the same for a lot of different things. Like even in the music industry, we see a lot of kind of social media campaigns that run this way. People asking why do I get an initial bump in listeners, and then it tails off and no one ever comes back. And the main thing with that is you're not bringing people back in with the content. So putting that prep time in, understanding what your goals are, what you want out of it, what your listeners want out of it, and doing things like, so it's been a pleasure to work with you today and over the last couple of weeks on putting this podcast together, because you're so thorough in making sure that what's going to go into this podcast is discussed, understood. I can go away, make sure I know what points I want to make and how I can deliver those points, because the last thing anybody wants is to kind of tune into this podcast and it's not good for you, it's not good for me, for them to walk away and say, a 10, 15 minutes in, be going, well, I don't, like, they're not getting to any point. I'm not getting anything out of it. Time, as we all know in this world at this point in time, at this moment, for everybody, time is a precious commodity. Our engagement, our attention is very, very valuable, and we can't afford to take that risk of not capturing people and keeping them entertained and engaged.
Yeah. And I love kind of outlining and stuff with my guests. And I always do a pre-interview, because for me, it helps me to make a connection with my guests, where we're not just meeting somebody for the first time and hitting record. That's hard to generate that kind of interaction. But I want to honor your time. You're giving me time to do this today. You could be doing 100 other things, but you've set aside time to do this with me, which I want to honor by being prepared. I don't want to show up and dishonor you by, I don't even know what to ask you. I don't even know your history or who you are. And then, tell me about yourself. I don't know anything about you. That just tells me that as a host, you probably didn't do your research, and maybe a little bit of research, you could get past some of that I don't know you stuff and get right into the content and help the listener connect with what we're talking about. They want to know, they're here to get content, not to hear our bio. They're not here to hear about our story. They want to know, what can I do today to sound better on my podcast? That's it. That's why they're here, right?
100%. It reminds me of that episode of The Office, the US version of The Office, where Michael says, sometimes he says he starts a sentence and sometimes he doesn't even know where it's going. He just hopes he finds himself somewhere along the way. And we've all listened to the podcasts where the host is doing exactly that. They've started something and they're not sure. I think they're trying to figure out what they're saying as they're saying it. And you can see, even in a comedy, people switch off. And, we're kind of waiting for a joke when we watch that. And it's a scripted TV show. I know, before anyone wants to just kind of jump on my back about this, I know it's a scripted TV show, but you see it in people's faces when the rambling starts, people switch off. We start to turn off and look away, and our minds wander onto other things. And again, that was 15, 20 years ago. We're talking now, our attention span is even smaller. Our kind of propensity to stick by something and stick with something is nowhere near what it was even at that time. So by going in and doing all these kind of things, it's providing that value. And I think to a certain extent, for me, things like this, it's like with any relationship, there's a give and a take. There's nobody listening to any podcast in the world that owes that podcaster a listen. So, if I'm going to give you my time, if I'm going to make you a part of my day, and I'm going to come to you for information, because there's 100 different podcasts about the same thing.
Exactly.
Why am I going to come to yours? So providing that value and there's a give and take in it, being able to give as well is so key, because like I said, there's 100 more podcasts about the exact same thing. So
people come for the content, but stay for the host. There's something about the host that 100%. They connect with, and they're like, that's my person. Again, I listen to a lot of podcasts about podcasting, and at the beginning when I started this show, I'm like, who am I to have a podcast about podcasting? Because there's so many other ones. But I found that there was a gap in the conversation that no one was addressing, and I'm thinking, well, instead of me waiting for them to catch up to what I was looking for, I'm just going to create the episode I want and bring on great people who are podcasting to hear from them. Again, the other side to this is I don't know everything. Shocker. I don't know it all. I don't know the answers to everything, and I don't know what I don't know. So having somebody come on with your background far exceeds my background in audio. So I'm here to learn from you. And I just think the more voices in podcasting, then it's not just one person's opinion, one person's point of view. You have a totally different way of approaching life than I do. So I'd like to learn from you, and all of us together can do better by hearing more people talk about their journey. So that's why I like having you on the show.
Yeah. And so I recently did a YouTube video I put a video on my YouTube channel where I was explaining, because I put through there's a booking form if you want to work with me. And the booking form, every now and again, I get a phone call on that booking form saying, or I'll get a DM on social media or an email from someone just saying, I'm really sorry. I don't know what this means. Can you please explain it to me? Because I don't want to click something wrong in the order form and I end up charging them like £100 more than they need to charge them. And equally, they just want to make sure that I've got the best possible information rather than them guessing and me waiting for all of this stuff, only for them to give me this. And then I'm sat there thinking, well, where's the rest of it?
Yeah.
So, and that lack of communication. And the amount of times I've seen someone ask that question and the amount of times I get apologized for asking that question. But like you say, some people, we don't know what we don't know. And there are so many people in the world I think there are a lot of snake oil salesmen in this industry. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of people who can sell you, who like to sell answers when they don't know the question. If you hear me. So I think there's a lot of people out there being given bad advice and bad information. It's, the amount of podcasters that I hear speak who don't know what mastering is in audio. Yeah. And as a sound engineer, I've known what mastering is since I was 13 years old. I've known what that is since the very beginning of my career. Yeah. And I could very easily, as someone working in audio, be, what do you mean you don't know what mastering is? Go away. I don't. How do you not know? But actually, what I realize is not everybody in the world of podcasting has even heard of mastering, or they've not heard of. I mean, you can kind of get the idea of what it is when I say mic technique, but you can kind of, using our logical powers and our understanding of what microphone is and what technique is, that what it means, but knowing what that actually is. Well, if you've never heard of it before, how are you expected to know what that is? That's not fair on you.
Yeah. Right.
And so I think you're absolutely right. And who knows best what podcasters are missing? Other podcasters. The best way for me to know and understand what a podcaster needs throughout their daily life producing a podcast was to make my own.
Yeah.
Or be so heavily involved with somebody else's that I got to see all of that day to day and say, and again, this is why when initially trying to get into podcasting, I didn't come in and say, let me produce the podcast for you. I came in and said, I don't know what it takes to produce a podcast, but what I do know is your audio. How are we going to get your audio sounding as good as it possibly can? Let me learn from you, because you're good at the admin stuff and you're good at the kind of the producing side of it.
Interesting.
I'm good at the audio side of it. So having that, I think being part of that, offering, finding what value can you offer, and finding that niche, finding that gap in the market with and approaching it with humility and understanding and appreciation of the fact that we don't all have the same information, and the cards that we're all dealt are different.
Okay, so talk a little bit too about how podcasting is in your part of the world. I know as a Canadian, I hear a lot of U.S. awards for podcasting, and they celebrate American podcasters, and it seems very U.S. centric, where there's a whole population of Canadian podcasters who get very little acknowledgement. And all the best conferences are in the U.S., and everyone's supposed to come to the U.S. I'm like, well, what about Canada? What about UK? What about New Zealand? Like, there's other places in the world. You know, we hear of the World Series of Baseball, which is U.S. It's not even the world.
Yeah.
Right? So it's kind of a joke that, you know, it's not really the world. So in your part of the world, how big is podcasting? Is it growing? What kind of things are you seeing from where you sit?
It's huge here in the UK. Without shadow of a doubt, it's continuously growing. I think in terms of the finance side of it, we're still behind, but welcome to a world that involves America. This is where we're always going to be, and that's no hate again.
No.
I love. I've got a lot of amazing American friends. I love one of the sports. I don't get me wrong, but yeah, there's a lot of monopolization in that industry that does tilt towards. For me, that kind of that slightly southern direction when looking over the pond. But it's a growing market here. It has been since the boom of podcasting in 2017. I think maybe we took a slight bit longer for it to reach us realistically, but definitely as soon as as soon as the pandemic hit, all over it. And I think that could be the same for a lot of the world. But actually, when I look at some of the stats around podcasting, just how big Spanish podcasting is, not just in primarily southern parts of the United States, but in Mexico, in Spain, in South America, French-speaking podcasts are growing quite fast. My wife is from Wales, and there are a number of Welsh-speaking podcasts that I like to think I can follow along with them now, but I can't. And there's huge pockets of podcasts in different languages, in different cultures, and all that sort of stuff popping up now, which is really nice to see. And hopefully, I think for me, I don't know about you, but I just hope it starts to translate into, I don't know, maybe some of the finance side of it and the business side of it. Reaching.
That would be nice if it kind of made its way to us as well. And then I guess the one thing when I look at being in the shadow of the U.S., definitely for us, because we're like just north of them, we always live in the shadow of the U.S., but it just means that they are doing a lot of great work that will benefit us in Canada and the UK. It will come to us eventually, but being in the shadow just means we got to work just a little bit harder to make sure our voices are heard and get ourselves out there, connect with other podcasters, build community. It's not like it's hopeless that it's only the US that does podcasts well. We can all do podcasts well. So like here we are doing this, it's amazing that you can have time with somebody like this, the other side of the pond, like we are. It's great. It's amazing.
100%. And I think I'm very aware that from the UK, I think as a country, the way we kind of handle ourselves, I think we probably take a little bit of the shadow off Canada as well. And I think if people aren't looking at the US, they're looking over at the UK. And to a certain extent, I think that means Canada can move in the shadows, do what you want, get into whatever trouble you want, no one's looking. But also it means that, like, I think what we have some of the I guess the benefit of doing is seeing what others do wrong, not necessarily having to truly pay for the consequences. And in that sense as well, though, like I think I prefer to be someone who looks at the positives and the benefits and the future, rather than kind of going, well, this isn't great, the US podcasting scene is taking us over, or things like that. I think one thing that's really positive at the moment, and that's coming out of the scary thing, there's a lot of, even in the States, a lot of that money's leaving. The corporate side of podcasting is taking a huge hit. Spotify have decimated the whole podcasting division. They're dropping podcasts left, right, and center, the exclusive ones that they had.
Mm-hmm.
And I see a lot of independent podcasters kind of going, well, what does that mean for us? I'm like, well, for the most part, we weren't part of the corporate world of podcasting anyway. We were just helping prop it up for them to jump on top of it. And I think it's not necessarily been just podcasting in the States. You look at it's Hollywood and the big major companies that there are a lot of incredible small independent podcasters in the States that are feeling the same effects as we are in terms of being overshadowed and being kind of. But while I think that you can look at there's a lot of the corporate side leaving podcasting, and I think for us, for the independent podcasters, the audience has grown big though because of the corporates. It's grown because they've had the money to give to Harry Harry and Meghan, or they've had to give to major your Travis and Jason Kelce's of the world. I know they'll carry on, but the audience has grown exponentially because of it. And while they leave, there's a huge audience now that is now podcastless.
Right.
And it's not like they're going to ditch podcasting forever. No, it's not like they don't still know what podcasting is. They're there for the taking in a non-horrible way for that to sound. They're there for the taking. They're there for us to try and get. And so there's a huge podcasting audience out there right now that are podcastingly homeless.
Yeah.
And that is where I think us independents can now run out and go, right, it's our time again now.
Yeah. It's a perfect time to start a podcast. You're not too late if you're listening. It's not too late to start a podcast. There's millions of podcasts, but there's only a fraction of them that are actively producing regular episodes. So it's a good spot to be.
Exactly. The audience is ever growing. The amount of podcasters, because you look at the amount of podcasts that boomed during COVID and the initial COVID year, because so many people were stuck at home with nothing to do, that they went, do you know what? Why not? Yeah. I'll start a podcast because I've got a microphone on my laptop and I've got Zoom, and me and my friends are having conversations about football, about politics, about various different things. We're just having random funny chats on a Friday night while we all have a beer and just spend time together. Yeah. Those are the sort of things that, and then all of a sudden we all go back to work. Life starts to happen again. We remember all the responsibilities that we did have them 4 or 5 months ago.
Yeah.
So they start the podcast, all of a sudden life gets in and they stop. And so there's a huge amount of podcasters that have stopped kind of putting out episodes and things like that. And that audience, well, it has grown. But you also look at the technology side of it as well. It's never been cheaper to start a podcast.
True. Yeah.
Ever. It's never been cheaper to get a genuinely quality microphone or a good enough quality microphone. It's never been cheaper to get a laptop, or our mobile phones have more than enough power and capability to record and make a podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
And there are free resources on the internet. There are free hosting sites.
Yep.
Okay, like with anything, if there's a free and a paid version, you will have to sacrifice something with that free version. But it's free to get your podcast out there. It's free to social media apps. We know what the way at least one of them's going, maybe not. But for the majority of social media apps, it's free to start an account and start engaging with people. And we have those apps anyway, and we're engaging. So I think that it's definitely the best time to start a podcast in terms of, like, say, having the audience there, having a lot of podcast homeless people looking for somewhere to get the content. But it's also never, that's just in terms of audience. In terms of putting it together, it's also never been a better time, because everything you have to make a podcast, you either have it already or it can be very, very cheap to go and get.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and there's so many new tools coming. There's AI. There's all kinds of stuff happening that can help you with your podcast. If you don't have the skill set to do something, there's probably a tool being created as we talk that's going to help in the future.
Exactly. And like to do that kind of shameless thing as well, if you're not the greatest with your audio, there are people like myself who, look, I'm not saying I'll come in and I'll mix and master everybody's episodes for free for the rest of my life, but if someone wanted to send me a message on social media and just say, listen, I'm getting this microphone, what do you think?
Yeah.
I'm having a little bit of issue. Like, I've got this really annoying sound coming in on my microphone. What can I do? How can I get rid of it? What's the best course of action? There are lots of people out there. I like to think I'm friendly and helpful. My wife keeps looking at me when I say things like that and kind of going, yeah, okay. But I like to think that people like me were nice and were lovely and helpful. So with these people out there who were willing to help as well, and like I said, I think if someone was to send me a direct message and say, listen, I've got a bit of advice, need a bit of advice, I'm more than happy to have a chat with someone and see if I can help in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a perfect time to do that. So how do we do that? How do we connect with you?
Well, I'm Sound Guy Fletch. I found out unfortunately because I rebranded myself not too long ago, and there is someone else called Sound Guy Fletch. So if you can't, we said it at the start of the episode, and I'll say it again now. I'm from Manchester in the UK. If you reach a guy and he's from Texas, if you look for Sound Guy Fletch and he's in Texas, it's definitely not me. You can tell that straight away. Yeah. It's not me. So on things like Twitter and Instagram, I'd be Sound Guy _ Fletch.
Okay.
And then on the rest of things like YouTube and Facebook and TikTok, I'd just be Sound Guy Fletch.
Okay.
And a lot of the content that I've got on there at the moment is some, like, what I feel is nice stories from my time as an engineer, talking about doing recording. I've got a video on that I thought was actually going to do a lot better than it did, but talking about doing a recording session in my pajamas a few years ago with a vocalist, which is a wonderful. I can explain better another day, but that was a good one. And especially on the YouTube, I'm going to be looking at doing things that I've got a video on there right now that's how do you prioritize a home studio on a budget, which I think might be helpful for some podcasters who are looking to get into it, where just I get to kind of break it down in a really quick way. If you have a budget for making something like this, there are certain things you can do right now in order to make sure that you get the best out of that budget, and it's understanding how to prioritize the budget. So and it's using a thing that I don't know where else it's used, but particularly in the audio world, we call it the signal path. So that's from the point of source of audio, which is right now our mouths in this sense. And if you're doing a podcast, it'll be your mouth, unless you've magically found some way to do a podcast from your armpit, but that's really cool. That's niche.
That's very niche. Yes.
But, you'd be looking at, that's the start of the audio signal path, and then it goes into a microphone, and then into, depending on the type of microphone you've got, it might go straight into your computer or your laptop, or it might go into an audio interface, depending on the type of microphone that you've got. And following that signal path, so you prioritize the microphone, because that's what's picking up your voice. And if your quality is going to dip as you go through that path, you'd rather start out at the best possible quality and then dip a little bit than start at low quality and hope it increases, because the quality won't increase as it goes through the path. So if you have a budget of, say, £200, and that has to go on a microphone and a pair of headphones, your headphones are at the very, very end of that path, because that's where you're listening back from at the very end. So the biggest chunk of that budget, put it on the microphone.
Good.
It might not sound great to you on terrible headphones, but trust me, when we're listening to it on a pair of studio speakers or studio quality headphones, or someone's listening to it on great headphones or speakers or things like that, it'll sound a lot better than your laptop mic going through a pair of $700 headphones.
Right. Yeah. That makes sense. And also treat the room the best as you can. Soft surfaces. Put the dog out. You don't need the dog barking in the background. I have a neighbor who lives next door to my house, and every Monday at a certain time, he's working in his yard. So I just know I'm not going to record on Mondays because he's a creature of habit. I'm just not going to record when I know he's going to be like 10 feet away from my window making noise. I'm just not going to record that day. That's an editing day, so that kind of stuff.
100%. So understanding and knowing your environment, you don't have to be an acoustical genius to know that if you are recording in a room, say like a bathroom, there's going to be a lot of room noise in there. You don't have to be you can hear it.
Yeah.
It's not something that like you have to be a professional sound engineer to get it. It's like you say, getting some. It doesn't even have to be going online and buying a 12-pack of unknown acoustic foam for $5 is going to do a lot less than you can put a coat behind you, and that will probably do more. But understanding your environment, knowing where you are, and trying to understand how to get that best, understanding how microphones pick up,
Yeah.
and what a microphone actually does. So on my microphone here, I've got 3 different settings that I can have it on in terms of how it will pick up and where it will pick up sound from, and understanding those kind of things, and kind of the patterns that the microphone picks up from. What are the things you have to do to work around that? No, the majority of people, you're going to find if it says vocal microphone on the internet, chances are you'll be okay. It'll mostly pick up your voice and nothing else. But it will. There are microphones out there that don't just pick up in front of them. There are microphones that'll pick up all around.
Yeah.
There are microphones that'll pick up your voice and whatever's behind it. There are lots of different things that you do have to somewhat be careful of. And yeah, so understanding your environment, understanding your equipment, of which like there are there are hundreds of thousands of free resources out there, and if they fail you, that I am a free resource as well,
Yeah.
and I'm sure that people like yourself are more than would generally be okay with getting a DM and saying, "Listen, I've got an idea for a microphone. What are the things I need to be wary of?" And again, microphone technique is one I said at the start that I feel like is very important, because of if I'm not going to go and do my microphone technique test on you now, because like obviously I don't want awful distortion or me sounding awful on your podcast. But there are, if you're too close, that might sound great. That can cause issues. If you're too far away, might sound great, might cause issues. If you're shouting, if you're too quiet, there are a load of things that. There are a lot of things you need to take into account. That's true, but it's not as daunting and as this major task that we're probably making it sound it. I'm probably making it sound like it is. It's manageable, and I'm just trying to see if I've got around here. There's something that I've got that actually might be a really good showcase for this.
Yeah, while you're looking for that, the other thing to think about too is sometimes there might be a really popular microphone that everybody says is the best, but it might not work for your particular voice. You might be a very loud talker. You might be very quietly spoken, and that microphone, even though it's popular, might not be the best mic for your particular voice. So you need to kind of understand that just because anyone tells you that you should buy X or Y or this mic, it doesn't mean it's going to work exactly for your particular voice. So just understand that.
Exactly. So I've got things like this. I can't remember if it's so this is a portable vocal booth that you can find them from very, very expensive to very, very cheap on the internet. And what that will do is when you see, for anyone who isn't already familiar with them, they will act like a vocal booth will, and they provide acoustic paneling for you. So if you are talking and right behind you is a horrible wall that reflects a lot of sound, it's going to like kind of barricade that microphone or kind of give you a little bit of kind of protection around your microphone so that the reflections from the room and all the different room sounds are going to be minimized. I don't know why I forgot English then, but it's going to be minimized by that. And yeah, you're right with microphones as well. There's such a different variety of microphones out there that all do different jobs, because when you think that there are microphones out there that are more designed for, say, a kick drum.
Right.
Oh, the frequencies that when you understand that sound is made up of just a load of different frequencies and waveform and the way the air pressure moves and all that sort of stuff, and trying not to get into the physics of sound. That's another podcast for another, like a whole different podcast. But the certain microphones are made to pick up certain different sounds. Now, what's going to work and what's going to make a kick drum sound really nice isn't going to be what makes your voice sound really nice, or what is going to work with your voice. So yeah, there's a variety of different things you need to take into account in those sort of senses as well. There's things like understanding the difference between a USB mic and an XLR mic, because the last thing you want to do is order a XLR mic thinking it'll just plug into your laptop straight away, and it won't. Understanding the difference between a dynamic and a condenser microphone. Yep. So what I've got here right now is a condenser microphone, which means it needs 48 volts of power in order for it to work and actually pick up the sound because of the components inside, which I've got through an audio interface, which is then what goes into my laptop. And then that obviously that's fair for anyone who isn't 100% aware of this kind of thing. And if you don't have the ability to have an audio interface, then you need to be making sure that you've not got a condenser microphone, because you need that it needs that power that your laptop, like the USB part of your laptop, won't get.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
So there are a lot of little things that people can get tripped up on, and unfortunately, there are a lot of companies out there. I spoke about snake oil salesmen. There are a lot of companies out there that they don't sell exactly very expensive or well-designed microphones, but they're designed for people who don't know really what aren't 100% sure. Designed for giving as little information as possible while saying, no, don't worry, it'll work, it'll be fine for you. You'll like it, it'll be fine, and then you get it and you realize you can't just plug it into your laptop. So what you're going to need to do is you'll need to go back to them and buy this extra thing
and this, yeah.
And so there's a lot of, and that kind of goes back to like the whole, well, if you don't know much about microphones and you've gone onto Amazon to find a microphone and they've said, no, don't worry, this is the mic that you need. And you trust that person of that company of authority who knows, they know what they're talking about microphones. Why would they lie to me?
Right.
Because they want more money. But there are things like that unfortunately a lot of podcasters do get tripped up by, and it's some of the more dishonest.
Yeah.
Or just having that whole. I think some companies out there expect you to, or some things out. So there are some things out there where they'll kind of expect you to know,
right,
and have prior information and prior understandings of specific things that if you don't have them, they can trip you up.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
so
good knowledge. I like that.
Being wary of things like that.
I like it. Yeah. So okay, I think that I need to have you back in the future, because I think we've touched on some things, and I'd love to continue the conversation because your insight, your experience would be so helpful for a new podcaster who really wants to dial in their sound and have their podcast have a great impact because they sound good on the microphone. So I would like to have the door open that you could come back in the future and continue the conversation, if that's okay with you.
100%.
Okay.
The door will continuously be left open, and if it does get closed, I'll give you a key.
Good.
So absolutely.
Great. So again, let's shout out where they can find you. And I know you offered to help answer questions, which is very kind of you. For those that are listening and you want to get some great advice, tell us again, where do we go?
Yeah. So if you're on Facebook and Twitter, you're looking at Sound Guy. I'm Sound Guy Fletch, but on Facebook, on Twitter and Instagram, or X and Instagram now, I am Sound Guy _Fletch. Again, if you find a guy from Texas, it's not me. But Facebook, TikTok, and kind of the general very popular social media platforms, I'm just Sound Guy Fletch. And then things like YouTube, where I am working on putting together more and more content on there as well, which would hopefully be, I like to think that while I will have a focus on maybe a bit more of the professional side of audio, that a lot of the content is still going to be geared toward. I grew up as a bedroom producer, and a bedroom sound engineer. That's how I started, and I know what it's like to be in that position of starting out, not knowing much, and having a lot of people expect you to know a lot, and kind of feeling like you're navigating the world on your own. And that was back when it wasn't so common that you could get a microphone for £50 And now you go on Amazon and there's 1,000 microphones for £50 that you can get that are varying different qualities and things. So yeah, on those sort of platforms that like I will be putting together more content for kind of everybody, I guess. But more than happy again on things like TikTok, on Instagram, Twitter, or X, Facebook to get to any DMs, anything like that. Please do chat to me if you've got any questions, particularly about audio production and the audio side of things. That I've been more than happy to kind of talk. I like just talking audio anyway. I don't have as many full-on audio friends as I'd like to, so it is actually, and I have a lot of friends into various sports, so it'd be nice to actually talk to someone about something other than sports at the moment.
There you go.
As much as I love it, I really do, but it would be nice to have some different conversations.
Excellent. So everyone reach out and talk to Sound Guy Fletch. Again, you've heard him on the show. He's a great resource, somebody that can definitely help you and give you some great insight. And again, we're going to have him back on in the future. And if you have questions for Sound Guy Fletch in the future, let us know and we'll compile those. And next time we get together, we'll have him answer your questions. Again, thank you so much for making time to do this. And go Lions go, I guess.
Always go Lions go. Thank you so much for having me. It's been great to chat to you. I hope, like I say, we'll be back on again soon.
And if you play for the Detroit Lions and you want to get on a great podcast and talk to somebody who loved to talk to you, Sound Guy Fletch would love for you to reach out and be on a show.
Or as I've said, I've not been over to the States yet to watch a game. So if you want to fly me out there and bring me over. If that happens through this podcast, you coming with me too.
I'll meet you there. Yeah, we'll do it together. I love it. Thank you so much for being part of this. It's great. And make sure you come back in the future.
Will do. Thank you.
Okay.